Hello, I'm Addison, and this is From Concept to Launch. The From Concept to Launch project follows Sophia Nicholas, the founder and CEO of Sophie PR, through the process of opening a cannabis business. We are joined by Ali Bianco, the founder and CEO of Pink's Products, and a cannabis business consultant. Ali is sponsoring and mentoring Sophia as she prepares to launch a cannabis brand in the New York market. Opening a cannabis centric business is not a DIY project. As of September 2025, the legal cannabis market in New York has surpassed 2 billion in total revenue since recreational sales began. You need a cannabis attorney for more than dotting I's and crossing T's. You need an attorney to keep you from losing your ass and your assets. Natalie Diaz is a corporate and compliance attorney licensed in both New York and New Jersey. She is experienced in supporting businesses in highly regulated industries, particularly in cannabis. Her focus is on helping clients navigate the complex regulatory landscapes, secure licenses, build internal compliance frameworks, and close impactful commercial sales and deals. Natalie has led regulatory strategy and deal execution for multi state operators and emerging startups. She has earned a reputation for strategic thinking, legal precision, and pragmatic counsel. Her record includes successful cannabis licensing across New Jersey and New York, favorable negotiation of leases, and robust BSA/AML compliance for cannabis banking clients. She's a frequent contributor to legal publications and is active in the New Jersey legal community as a CLE instructor and committee co-chair. Natalie believes in advancing ethical business operations by combining legal strategy with real-world business insights. Thank you so much, Natalie, for taking the time out of your busy schedule to be here today. So, Natalie, does Sophia and other cannabis entrepreneurs need an attorney at the licensing stage of their business, or is that a DIY?
Thanks, Addison, for having me. And I loved the introduction. That was so beautiful. And as far as your question goes, you don't necessarily need a lawyer for licensing purposes, but it is strongly recommended. Lawyers also help you with business entity formation, and that's normally the first step before you even begin licensing is what type of business to even choose. So lawyers can help you navigate through that. And then also with cannabis, it adds an extra level of complicity because of the fact we have 280E, which means that it's hard to regulate or for the tax purposes at the federal level, since it is a federally illegal enterprise. The taxes become a huge issue. Cannabis businesses are taxed very heavily because of 280E, and having the right business structure can help minimize the impacts of 280E.
So Sophia, since you're at the very beginning stage, you're at what type of concerns, questions, or what do you need to know from Natalie?
Right. I think, especially coming in and not knowing the terminology and all the different licenses and the restrictions, it's a lot easier to ask her like the like right away questions, like what are the most important things to know, like when you're first coming in? Because obviously, if you're coming in blind from any other industry, and you're looking to see like, again, just from my side, I didn't know the levels of licenses, which ones were out there, which ones we were even supposed to be applying for, and like when you start going into the tax side, it's like you don't know where to start. So I think it's a lot easier when you have lawyers on board and you can just like ask them like, please, like, can you explain this to me like I'm five? Like I think that's one of the hardest things, like just making sure you understand the business from that perspective.
So, Allie, having been through
So we're
this,
frozen. I was like,
Oh, we froze. Sorry, what were you saying, Addison?
oh, I was going to jump over to Allie while you were frozen. So, continue, ladies.
Um, uh, I guess I am next. When it comes to licensing and when I first started Pinks, I did consult with before I met Natalie, but I did consult with some attorneys, and it is super helpful because you need to know, especially like when you're partnering with more than, because I'm just a brand as Sophia is. So when you partner with a bunch of people involved in your company, it's really important, I would say, to get like an MOU, just a memorandum of understanding, where everybody knows what their tasks are, who is doing what and who's responsible for what. And then like especially like when you have the license, like you want to make sure that you're protected in every way, because some people can promise you something and then later down the line, they don't really do the work that you hired them to do or that they promised they would do, and then it becomes a problem later down the line. So you want to make sure that you and your company, which is your baby, is protected legally. And I will say Natalie knows more about the terminology of what forms you need, what signs you need, and all of that. But I will say an MOU is something that I think was very, very beneficial and helpful for a startup, with like when you're involving multiple people, so that everybody knows what they're doing and who's responsible for what legally.
right. And
So,
then, oh yeah, go ahead, Edison.
no, go ahead with your question.
No, I was gonna say, because I know we touched up on it, but it's like, at what stage do you start bringing these things in? Like, obviously, this is a lot different. This conversation is a lot different than others, because when you're talking about marketing and strategy, it's a lot easier to say what your vision is, and then you get to the legal side, and it's like, okay, yeah, I have all the fancy stuff, but I don't know how to solidify that brand on a more professional level, that when we do come into these issues, like everything's already set up. Like, you don't want to, pull the brand, because obviously you could do all the other stuff, get the packaging, get everything out there, start marketing, start telling everybody, like, you want to start putting in the stores. But then if something happens, say if there's a product that now somebody wants to sue you, now you're stuck in a rut, and you're like, well, when was I supposed to even like anticipate this, or just like, what was I supposed to do on my end before I even went on the shows, to make sure when stuff like this did happen, that it was already set in stone and we could deal with it head on.
I would say so. When it comes to like license, like when it comes to the brand and everything, MOU is important. Trademarks are important, just so you have like, your license. Also, I do think when you are making, a decent amount in sales, and like, your brand's really getting discovered and a lot of attention, it's important to look into insurance. And that's something that you may want to consider as a brand, because, just in case there is something on the label. Like I heard about this like horror story with this one brand that had these edibles, and they said take one per use, but this one girl ate the entire box of gummies and ended up having stomach problems and sued the company. Although even though the company does say on the package like one per serving, they still had some legal issues with that. And I believe they won. I am not positive. I don't know the brand personally, but I just know of this story. And because of that, I think about like, there should be like thoughts of insurance, but like the MOU, like having something that just has in concrete. And then also I've had to send a fair share of cease and desists with people that try to, take my brand, or, you know, say that they work for me when they don't. And those are things that you do have to take in, like that I had to just kind of learn as I go. That is something like you don't have to, like, for me, I didn't know every legal thing that needed to be known. And actually I was like I've just been like, I feel like a newborn baby in this world of business. But I do feel like learning as I go, it's a roller coaster, you know, like I've gotten screwed, but I've also gotten it helps to make sure that you do have like, you know, those a legal representative, somebody that you could speak.
So,
So sorry, I had a phone call come in.
Natalie,
Is
what
it still
in
going?
dealing with cannabis entrepreneurs, cannabis businesses, and startups? What are the major mistakes that people make? Is it in compliance? Is it in contracts? Is it in intellectual property?
Yeah, I would say one of the most biggest mistakes is, to Allie's point, is not having anything in writing. Whether that be with your business partners, whether that be with employees, whether that means, filing a trademark to protect your brand, or, filing any copyrights for your website content and any product packaging and design. So those are the most significant mistakes that I've seen is people do not have things in writing, they do not make the proper filings, and that leads to a whole slew of different mistakes for, different cannabis companies.
Are those mistakes correctable, or are they, or do they end businesses?
It can go both. It depends on how severe, the problem is. If you have a partnership dispute and there's, a bunch of partners that think that they have their hands in the pot and there's no operating agreement or there's no bylaws, then that creates mass confusion. Also, that creates confusion about, the sweat equity. That also creates confusion on, the liabilities that the company has and how those liabilities get split up. Others are easier, like compliance mistakes. As long as there's no enforcement actions, those are easier to correct.
So investors or a partner. Um, so in doing a business partnership, now that would definitely be an area where you would need an attorney to fill out the paperwork. But how
You
does
do.
that all, so with that process, how do you work, how do you initially work with partners and or investors? What is the legality? Where do you start with that? Or
Yeah,
do you
so
just sign their contract and go out into la 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 land?
so the first thing you should always start with is a term sheet. The term sheet is your Bible for how the business is going to be conducted and how this transaction is going to happen.
And
So
what
that is
is that?
Yeah, term sheet is like a blueprint for how the transaction is going to be conducted. It has all the basic terms. It also details the parties. It answers the who, what, when, and how.
Is that kind of like the MOU, like what I was saying earlier?
Yep.
Okay. Okay, yeah.
But what I see is that, a lot of especially with the rise of AI, is people are using AI to write these term sheets. And unfortunately, AI is not good for drafting contracts or anything of that nature. AI will not be able to give you specific information. AI doesn't know what, boilerplate clauses are that you have to include, and also detailed clauses to make sure that you're protected. It will
Right.
give you a skeleton, but that's why you need a lawyer, is to have the meats on it. And also with the term sheets too, I advise not to have basic term sheets. You want this agreement to be so detailed that there is no room for error when the other documents are being drafted once the term sheet is signed. Because just one little point of percentage that wasn't included in the term sheet, that gives headaches along the line.
Right.
Interesting. No, this is really, thank you so much for educating us on this because even myself as like learning going through the process of starting a company, creating like, you know, an MOU, you're 100% right. Like one little small detail in there can mess up everything. Like for example, not everything, I shouldn't say that, but like I didn't know how important it was to have no no sharing or no movie, like a clause like where it says like they can't work with another like marijuana brand and tell them like everything that you're doing in your brand, like something like there was something small like that where like I was told like a long time ago that that little detail, like they could go and take my company and just and because I didn't put that in there, it was like something so small but so important. And I don't know the exact legal terms of it, Natalie. I think you would know more of what I'm saying. But there was something like if I didn't do that, this the the person could have taken my whole company, and I didn't even know that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
Now,
so
so if you screw up, how do you fix it, Natalie?
well,
So,
the term sheet is normally not binding. So there are binding term sheets and not binding term sheets. There are binding provisions that you need within a term sheet. That's confidentiality clauses that, this entire transaction is confidential to both the parties involved. There's also exclusivity provisions, which means that you're not allowed to go out and shop around, that this term sheet is solely for the parties and exclusively for the parties. You can also make other other binding provisions, such as attorney's fees. So if there was ever a dispute within that term sheet, the prevailing party, they have the right to attorney's fees.
And those are important because attorney fees do they run up if you have a
Yeah, they
disagreement.
are pretty costly. So that's why, there's the saying, a penny's pinch is a penny's worth. So if you try to do things cheaply in the beginning, you might end up having to pay a lot more for it down the road.
Yes.
now in entering into a partnership or bringing in investors, um, at that point, do you need an attorney to negotiate the contract?
Yes, you don't need to, but it's always highly recommended because you are going to get agreements like an operating agreement that might be 90 something pages long that is entirely of legalese, and you're going to look at it and be like, WTF, I have no idea what this means. Even if you plug it in through AI, it's not going to give you a full understanding. So highly recommend to have an attorney explain to you what these terms mean and negotiate it on your behalf.
So so we're all three sitting here with in terror because you're speaking a language that we are not familiar with and that we need to know, and you're talking about things that we need to know, and each of us are going to jump off of this and go look at our stuff, and if we already have an attorney, call our attorney and go, look, are you
Natalie, I might
doing
have some more work.
this? So how do we as women in the cannabis space, which is so competitive, cutthroat, and high risk, how how do we know what you're talking about, Natalie?
Right, like
That's another reason why you should get an attorney. It's like when I go to a mechanic and they try to gaslight me into something's
oh
broken and
yeah.
making me pay more. It's the same concept. If I wanted to, literally fight with this person, I have to know their language. I don't know about cars or anything, so I couldn't tell you. So that's why I would need, to the same situation, I would need a lawyer to explain those things and to negotiate so I can have a full understanding of what's going on.
Right.
So I have a random question. So with like having an attorney on call, um, would that be like almost like a contingency thing, or would it be like if we needed or would it be like we'd pay like it would be like something like as a brand like we pay you like a certain month or like
Hmm.
yearly amount for like on call
Like a
like how
retainer.
would that yeah like
Yeah.
how would that retainer yes.
So typically, and especially with the transactions and the contracts, you pay a attorney on retainer, which means that you pay like a deposit, a sum of money, and then the lawyer charges hourly. And for the work performed, that gets taken out of the retainer. Sometimes you need to replenish the retainer. I've also, a new concept now is having fractional general counsels. So basically, some attorneys will charge you like a monthly fee, and that includes, limited scope of services. But that's really, sometimes you might need more help than what's expected outside of those limited scope of services, and that's why retainers work better in those kind of
So what do
situations.
you recommend? Do you recommend like for a company to do like like retain you and then kind of like have that money like have that retainment there for if down the road they face legal issues, they could say, at least I have a retainment with an attorney and I could call them right away.
Yes.
And okay, that's really good to know,
Yeah,
actually. I like that.
that's how I operate on retainers, so
Hmm.
it works well.
It works well. I like that. And that's how you do it with your PR as well. Like you do the same thing on the other end.
Right.
That makes sense. Sorry, I just wanted to know how, because that's smart too. Like that's something that, you don't know when you need a lawyer. So when you are starting a business, think about that cost. Think about the cost of the retainer
Right.
and locking in an attorney, and then like just having an attorney just accessible is so important, and that's really important to know. So thank you for that.
Of
So
course.
also I wanted to know, like, obviously as some people coming into this industry, there's a lot of us are looking for investors, right? And then we know we need all these things on the back end, but it's like, how, if we can't afford a lawyer, how do we navigate to get to the point where we can do that? Like, is there instances where like you guys work towards a goal, and then if you can't meet that within the certain time frames, then you just like part ways, or like how does that work?
Yeah, it just all depends on what the term sheet states. And like I said, the term sheet is going to be your Bible no matter what. And that's what's going to designate how the parties proceed moving forward. So in a term sheet, you can stipulate a timeline. You can say that this term sheet will expire after X amount of days or months. And then you could also stipulate in there that if the parties don't reach a definitive agreement by X date, that this term sheet is going to expire. So there's various different ways that you can do that, but it always has to be, the main important thing, it has to be right in writing and signed by both parties.
Right.
Now, now I'm sure there's entrepreneurs listening to this have who are coming out of other businesses. They have an attorney, but we're talking cannabis. It's not like other businesses. So do people just screw themselves if they don't use a cannabis attorney for their cannabis business?
Not necessarily, because this business, there's so many aspects of this business that is touches so many different areas of the law. Like there's intellectual property that we've talked about, and there are IP lawyers out there that just specialize in that one area. There's attorneys who deal solely with contracts and partnerships and corporations, like corporate attorneys. There's also attorneys who deal with litigation and commercial disputes. So it's not, cannabis isn't really like a one size fits all type of thing. It is better to have one because of the cannabis regulations, especially if you're doing the corporate aspect of this, because it has to remain, whatever you're doing, whatever transaction you're facing, you're going to have to make sure that it is compliant with the regulations. And an attorney who doesn't, specialize in cannabis and don't know much about the regulations, there's a chance that they might fail to, stipulate and oversee that important aspect of the transaction.
Now, out of curiosity, you already had a established career as an attorney. You didn't have to go into cannabis. Why did you? Why? Why are you a cannabis attorney?
So it's funny because I didn't smoke weed until I was like 25 years old.
I was
I
thinking
did when
the
I
same
was
thing.
I did when I was a teenager, and that's when it was illegal, and I was under the age of 21. Then took a long hiatus. COVID came around, and I am not an alcohol drinker at all. So I'm like, stress of law school. I'm like, I need something to help me relax that is not alcohol and not other illicit substances. And they sat well. So I'm like, okay. And then also, me and my friend, it was always during COVID, you had so much free time, and we came up with the fact. I'm like, what do you always wanted to do? What's on your bucket list? And I was like, I want to make cannabis, or I want to make pot brownies. So then that's how I got like reintroduced to cannabis. And then I was like, when we were baking together, I'm like, this would be fun if I was an attorney that could guide people on this and help them to say, okay, this is legal and what's not legal. I had no idea what cannabis law was even about. then also my younger brother, he's autistic. He's, he was diagnosed and placed on medical marijuana, and that really helped out his symptoms a lot. So that also made me have more faith in the plant, that this was, a holistic approach instead of a Western approach to things. And I really advocate for those kind of approaches rather than, Western types of medicine. So that's basically the nuts and bolts how I got into it. Then, or why I got into it, I should say. But then it was, I would say, towards the end of 2021 when cannabis legalized in both New Jersey and New York, and I had no idea what cannabis law was about. So I tried to find internships or an attorney to mentor me on cannabis law because it was so new and the only thing that was existing at the time were medical treatment facilities. It was really hard to find an attorney that I could work with. But fate had it otherwise. I ended up finding an attorney who I could work underneath, and I, submitted the first round of applications for a bunch of different licensees, and the story goes from there.
Oh, that's great. That's funny too,
That's
because that's what
beautiful.
I tell everybody in this industry too. It's a lot more purpose driven. I feel like, just because same thing. I started later on in life. I wasn't